Let's pivot over to one of your favorite people, our very unique coordinator of basketball officials when you were there, Edgar Cartato, the late Edgar Cartato, who was an NEC Hall of Famer. He was a referee, and then from the start of the NEC, he was our coordinator of. I think it was from the start.
Yes.
I don't, maybe not, but from the '80s, he was our coordinator of officials. Very unique man, a favorite of mine. Uh, you do you have any story or one story about Edgar that has resonated with you through the years?
Well, I mean, Edgar was full of stories. I mean, he would tell you how when he was a young man, he drove Lou Costello around. I can't remember if it was in New Jersey or if it was in California, but he told that story. He told about a game he worked at Georgetown with the late John Thompson on the sideline. And the very first time Edgar blows the whistle, Thompson throws his hands up and gets excited, doesn't like it, and Edgar looks at him and says, "Relax, John. I'll get better as the game goes on." He had a million stories, but what I remember best about him is when I can't tell you how many he did both the men's and the women's leagues for many many years. And I can't tell you how many games I watched sitting next to him on press row. And I would always learn something about basketball sitting next to him. He would see a play and anticipate what the call would be. And if the official made the call, he was happy. And if he didn't, he'd be upset for a while. Um, but Edgar would teach you just in regular conversation during the game. I learned a lot about the intricacies of the game from him. He would get so nervous though when the game was close because the pressure was on his officials and he regarded that as a reflection on him. So invariably, when the game got close, he'd excuse himself, go out in the hallway, smoke a cigarette, and then come back. And when smoking was no longer allowed in buildings, he'd go outside the building, smoke the cigarette, and then come back. Towards the end there, when I left, I did worry because he was getting up in years and he was driving, these long distances overnight. He rarely stayed in a hotel when he would go see a game at Mount St. Mary's or even Robert Morris or St. Francis in Pennsylvania. And he'd drive all night back home. And I did that occasionally sometimes, but I was a lot younger than Edgar. But he was completely devoted to the officials. I think watching a poorly refereed game offended him. As a former official, it just offended him. And sometimes he didn't react well to it, but boy, he loved his guys. The guys that were at the top of his list. He just was a total promoter for.
He was a character, and we some of his guys. Tom Lopes went on to be our coordinator, and now Jack
Right?
Sweeney is our coordinator. So his legacy still lives here in the conference. But
Yeah.
I always like talking about him. All right, let's wrap up some of your NEC time at the NEC. When you look back at your time at the conference, the 9 years or so you spent here, what made this conference so special to you?
I think we touched a little bit on it, and that is the willingness of the group to work together to do what was right for the betterment of all, rather than just a narrow opinion of what's best for me. Um, I know a couple of times we made decisions about tournaments, how many teams should compete, that didn't please all the athletic directors, and but they went along with it because they knew, okay, I may not like it, it may not be best for my program, but it's best for the conference. The television, realizing that not everybody was going to get the equal number of appearances, and some of it was going to be due to merit, whether you had a good team that year or not, and some of it was going to be, frankly, where you were located, because that's what the network wanted. Um, so I really enjoyed my time there because it's a diverse group of schools, even though on the surface people may not think that, but it was a diverse group of schools. But they were willing to work together, and there are so many people that have stayed at the NEC for so long, and people like Lynn Robinson and Irma Garcia, and Marilyn McNeil for years before they left the conference. Just so many people that have remained with the NEC. If you look through the directories, which I do every once in a while, now that I'm retired, I have more time to surf the net, so to speak. So a lot of people who were there when I was there are still there, and I think that speaks volumes for the quality of the league and what's been done with it, over the last 2 decades or so.
What would you say is your proudest moment as commissioner of the conference?
I had a lot of good moments. We talked about how football kind of, got its, we went through some growing pains with football, but kind of got it started. One of the games I remember best was and you were there, the ECAC Bowl in Pittsburgh, when Sacred Heart was undefeated, I think ranked #1 among mid-major programs in AA at that time, and went in and beat Duquesne, which was favored and expected to win. That was a lot of fun, very memorable. The next year, we finally got to host one of those games, and it was at Albany, and I think you were there.
Yeah.
I remember Albany won the coin toss and elected to take the wind because the wind was blowing about 30 or 40 miles an hour. And Albany wound up winning with a shutout. That was a good moment. I was proud of some of the championship games we had. We had a great championship one year between, I think it was Quinnipiac and Central Connecticut. Yep. At Central. I had people coming out to me in the parking lot afterwards as I was about to leave, just saying, "Hey, Commissioner, great job with this championship. Thanks for bringing the game here." We had a great championship at Wagner one year, another one at Fairleigh Dickinson. Those are the memories that you always hang on to, because while one of the teams was unhappy losing the championship game, it was fun to see. It's always fun to see a team win, realize they're going to the NCAAs, their name's going to be announced on Selection Sunday. That was always a thrill.
Awesome. So in 2006, you moved on to the Southern Conference as their commissioner. You spent the rest of your career there until retiring in 2019. Why was that position attractive to you at the time?
Well, I had always heard about the Southern Conference from Vic Bubas, who played in the Southern Conference when he was at North Carolina State. They were a member back then. It was a league with great tradition. It was a part of the country that my wife was from. She's from Greensboro, North Carolina, and I knew nothing about Spartanburg, South Carolina, but the league, the position intrigued me. And they had football on I think a higher level than the NEC. That was appealing. So it was an opportunity to continue to kind of grow and to take what I had learned at the NEC and what worked and what didn't, and try it with a new league. So it was, I had applied years earlier, did not even get an interview, and then when I applied the second time, was fortunate enough to go down, interview, and be offered the position.
One of the questions I had for you about the SoCon is and I think this would be generally interesting to hoops fans, is the leap that the SoCon made in your last few years there in basketball. You went from the 28th ranked conference to the top 10. I think it was your last year, you had 4 teams in the pool, in that at-large pool at the end of the year. Those teams were really good. How did you, that's the impossible question for mid-majors. How do you turn it around and kind of get to that point? What is it that you did at the SoCon that'll put you in the position to even be considered on Selection Sunday to get multiple teams in?
Yeah, Ron, one of the things that I really got tired of listening to in my 13 and a half years here was, the SoCon has always been a one-bid league, which is true. The conference has never had an at-large selection. And the year you referenced, we were like 28th out of 32 conferences. And all I did was well, we did a couple of things. We talked about it with the coaches and we said, come on, fellas, we got to do better than this. And we talked about it with the athletic directors. And in addition to just saying, hey, it's gotta start from the grassroots level, you've got to say, I'm not waiting on the rest of the conference. My program is going to do better, and here's how we're going to do it. In addition to that, we did some things. We created a pool of revenue from exit fees. The Southern Conference had an enormous amount of realignment take place in 2012-13. We lost 5 of 12 members, and the only shining light in any of that was they all had to pay exit fees that luckily we'd had the foresight to raise before they left. So we used some of those funds to create kind of an excellence pool, and other conferences have done it. We didn't invent this, but we wanted to reward people for playing better schedules, for having success, and for kind of stepping out and testing themselves. And really the credit goes to the coaches. The coaches have, they have their resources, but they don't have the same kind of resources that bigger leagues do. But they were able to take some of this revenue, and we were able to focus attention on the fact that I wanted us to be more of a basketball league. Whereas the Southern Conference, when I joined them, the reputation was outstanding in football. They'd had national champions at Appalachian State and Georgia Southern in the 1AA and now FCS level. And that's great, but you're not competing at the highest level when you're in the FCS. In basketball, we're competing at the highest level. And if we have success in basketball, as Davidson did in 2008 when I was there, getting within one jump shot with Steph Curry of going to the Final Four, that gets you all kinds of attention and a lot of revenue that comes in from the NCAA, let's be honest. So we tried to put the focus more on basketball, and things fell in place. And you're right, we had 4 really strong programs. The morning of our championship game, I'm in my hotel room and I'm surfing around, and I noticed that Jerry Palm on the CBS website is predicting 3 teams from the Southern Conference. And it didn't happen, but that was a significant milestone to get to that point. And as it turned out, I think an upset in the Pac-12 cost UNC Greensboro. They were the first team out of the field after that upset occurred. Otherwise, we'd have had to win, and that old line would have been retired for good.
Yeah, it was amazing, and we were absolutely rooting for you up here at the time, because we know what you go through as a commissioner with basketball, and we're all trying to get to that point where
Right.
You're even considered for it. So that was a great job. So you retired seemingly at the right time in 2019. This has been a tough year for everyone, for student athletes, coaches, staff, medical staff, athletic trainers, support staff. Maybe not now during a pandemic, but do you miss the sort of the day-to-day?
No, I think I got out at the right time. I thoroughly enjoyed, I was in college athletics for 40 years, and I was a commissioner for 23 years, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But it felt like the time to get out. I always admired people like Barry Sanders, and I'm a Yankee fan. Mike Mussina, his last season, he had announced he was going to retire. His last season, he won 20 games for the only time in his career, but he went into retirement because he just felt the time was right. And so to use that analogy, I wanted to get out while I still had my good fastball. Before I had to take on something that would require a number of years to see through, whether that be another expansion or some other new strategic plan. I just felt like we had done a pretty good job of leaving the conference in good shape. It was wonderful to be able to leave on the high note of having a sold out basketball tournament in Asheville, and almost getting, the year before, almost getting 2 teams in the tournament. So that I felt like I was leaving the conference in good shape. The thing I do miss, and you hear athletes talk about this. Athletes always, they don't talk about the games. They talk about the camaraderie in the locker room with their teammates. I miss that to an extent. Dealing with not only the staff, but getting to know so many athletic directors and coaches, on a personal basis, has been rewarding for me. And every once in a while, that will, I'll think about that. But I must admit, after the virus hit last February and March, I haven't had a lot of days thinking, boy, I wish I was in that office.
Oh, there are times where it's interesting. Day to day is interesting, but you know what? You grind through, and we'll
Right.
come out the other side. Hopefully next year, and hopefully the 21-22 season, we're sort of back at it the way we're all used to, and we could. You get your budgets back where they need to be. You get your championships where they need to be, and everybody's, we're back, and that's what we're hoping for next year.
Yeah, I mean, everybody, not just college athletics,
Yeah.
everybody wants that, and hopefully with the vaccines and everything will be there. But yeah, I think it's rarely been as challenging these days as it is ever to be in a conference office and to try and put together schedules when games are being altered left and right, and teams are picking up games and dropping games. Um, and you feel bad for the athletes and the coaches, obviously. But nobody thinks about the officials. Nobody thinks about the conference office staff that has to deal with this. But we know, having worked there, that that's part of the job.
That's right. They should all send us gifts for the holidays for what we've been doing. It's
No question.
been so, John. First of all, thank you for spending an hour with us. You've been very instrumental in my career and the career of so many that have gone through the Northeast Conference. And I really enjoyed the time where you were commissioner. I mean, I'm happy now, but back then it was just a different era. Like everything was different then than it is now. And I look back on it with fondness, and there were so many, there were frustrating times, there were great times, but it all set the stage for what was to follow in the conference. And I think that we've continued sort of that climb that started when you were here, and we just, and Noreen has sort of taken it onto the next level, which is what should happen at every conferences, and just like you did at the SoCon.
Yeah, I think, well, you're very gracious to say that, but I think that's exactly what everybody tries to do when you work in a conference office. You want to take the job that you inherit and make it better so that the next person can build on any successes you've had. And Brenda and now Noreen have certainly done that. And the Northeast Conference, I think, has come leaps and bounds since the days when I was there. With 5 people in a one-room office building in Piscataway, New Jersey. Now you have very nice offices, I know, in Somerset, and people know about the NEC, I think, much more than when we took over back in the late '90s.
Yeah, when I got there, it was just you and me, John. Like when my first day, there was really nobody else there. I think Denise left a week later, and it was just you and me staring at each other in a very large lobby.
It didn't take long to have staff meetings. I remember that.
All right. Well, this was John Iamarino, NEC Commissioner, 1997 to 2006. Thanks for joining us. And hopefully I'll get a chance to talk to you again sometime in the future.
My pleasure, Ron. I enjoyed it. Best of luck to you and your family, and season's greetings.
Same to you. Once again, that was John Iamarino. This was the NEC Overtime Pod, and the segment was Made in the NEC. We will see you next time.